Hey everyone, Margarita here. I want to talk in this video today more in depth about me working in the entertainment industry for 17 years and all of the myths versus facts versus stereotypes and how I got started in it, and then mixed with the lies and delusions my mother's in the background telling people about me or how I make my money, which she knows nothing about whatsoever, and other people seeming to think my business or my numerous businesses or streams of income are all a joke. And part of it is due to me working in the entertainment industry, but really nobody knowing anything about. So I'm going to clear up some of those lies and delusions and the myths and the facts and stereotyping that goes along with all of that in this video. There's just a lot to it, especially because I was in this industry long term for 17 years. I'm going to go back to the time I got started in this industry and how I got things to where they are today and what role that this all played in my overall um, like income and business aspects going on in my life, because along the way I always had numerous things going on. So I'm going to go all the way back to the time I started in that industry. I guess technically the first time I was in that industry was in 2004, and I only did it for a week. But I also had a full-time job and I was very busy, and I never went back after that. There was no need to, because I already had so many things going on and more than enough income. So that was the only time that I did that, and it wasn't until 2007, once the economy started crashing, that I ended up working in the adult entertainment industry. Now, when that's something that you do, you're self employed. You don't work for the establishments. You're 100% self employed. You pay them to work, they don't pay you. You make your own schedule. You come in when you want. It's not somebody telling you what to do. That's your business. You're independently owned and operated. Um, as an individual, like on your tax returns, you're just a self-employed individual, and your services are the product being sold. So that is what it is. You're never working for somebody else. If somebody does that for work and they're telling you they work for somebody else, they're probably not very smart. They have no idea what's going on in life. But that's how that industry works. And I got started in it. Prior to that, I was already waitressing and bartending in the restaurant industry. I had been working in since 1998. So I had already waitressed and bartended within the adult entertainment industry prior to me becoming an entertainer myself. So I already had experience working in that industry, just in a different position. So once the economy started crashing in 2007, I was already on my second home that I owned. I had two kids, two cars, two homes, no child support. Um, and I was always used to making quite a bit of money, but the economy was crashing. So every industry was slowly uh, going downhill a little bit at that time. So, in order to control um, not losing any further money, or working at this restaurant or this bar, like serving or bartending. Um, Sometimes places are picky. They only want to give you so many hours or so many shifts per week. So I eliminated that I was still working in the restaurant and bar industry at the same time I began this. But what I did was I'm able to control when I work in that field, how many days or how many hours or when I go in or where I go. And what I would do is I would fill in the blanks of wherever I was waitressing or bartending at. Let's say I did 3 shifts there, then I would take whatever days were still available, and I would go. I would go dance on those nights. So I was able to control the gaps where I didn't feel if I was making enough money, I could just go to work. And it's not a problem. So that way I could maintain everything, keep everything running, especially because during this time the economy was so slow. The amounts of money being made was significantly reduced by quite a bit in all the different industries I had been employed in. during that time period when the economy started crashing from 2007 to like 2011-ish, 9, 10, 11. So around those time periods, those years, the industry I had been in all those years was not paying anywhere near what it once was. So in 2007, that's when I incorporated being an entertainer into my life and as one of my streams of income. And because it got to the point where uh, the restaurant and bar industry was just kind of so low for a couple of years, I just maintained only being an entertainer for about 2 years and didn't work at any more restaurants or bars for a while because the economy was so slow. It was more worth my time to spend it just being 100% in control of my income and of my employment. So that's what I did for a couple of years. And it worked. I managed to hold on to everything. I managed to keep everything running. But then around 2009 is when I started working for Applebee's. The economy was still low, but if you found the right restaurant or bar, you could still make really good money. So I worked for them for about 3 years during that time frame from 2009 to 2012. And I was making quite a bit of money there working 30 to 40 hours a week. And even then, they were a very lenient company back then. I don't know about now because I know things have changed a little bit within their company, but I was more easily able to control when I worked. You could control giving away shifts, picking up shifts, and whatnot. So during that time, I had 2 kids in school where I drove them and I picked them up. So I incorporated my shifts in with that, and then I'd make sure I'd work some of the bigger money nights, and then stay late those nights, which I did the whole time that I worked there. And also during that time, I was still self-employed as an entertainer. And during that time period, the majority of that time I worked in Detroit. So it was the same establishment for a lot of years. I have bounced around and worked at different establishments over the course of my life, whether it be one night here or 2 weeks there, or I'm just visiting somewhere and just working for that week, or regularly going to the same place and flying out. I was doing a lot of that as well. But during the time I worked for Applebee's, I mostly just stayed as an entertainer in Detroit. Times were different back then, so I don't know exactly how it's all ran now, what's going on now in the city of Detroit. But back then there was still money, and I was at a good place that had quite a bit of clientele. That the place had been there long term. There was it was kind of a dive bar, but it had a mix of different races, and the girls were all different races and sizes as well. So that makes for a busier establishment when it comes to that. There's going to be more customers coming through the door when it's more mixed versus all one type of person, one type of girl. So the place I was at was pretty profitable. I stayed there long term. I had been there in 2007. I continued to stay there, work there for about 9 years, on and off for about 9 years. And I still maintained working for Applebee's for those 3 years at the same time. Now, during the time I stopped working for Applebee's, the company started making changes within the company, and it caused some other problems. And I also had a manager that was jealous of me, the things I had going on in my life. I was also investing in real estate at the same time, looking to purchase a home with cash, and everybody knew that. So I do believe it's possible my mother was calling this lady in the background, also very jealous, and they were feeding off each other's jealousy about me. Looking back on it, knowing what I know now, and some of the things that were said and done, I'm pretty sure that that actually happened. That lady had set me up to get fired, acting as if I had not requested the week off that I was taking off. I was getting ready to go buy a condo in Florida, and she did it during that time. The second day I was down there, she staged an entire phone call to make it look like I didn't show up for work. But I do believe this was all planned, and I had been going back and forth. There was no problem with taking time off there, um, especially once you're there for like over a year or two. There's not really a problem with taking time off or requesting not to work this week or that week. It was never an issue. So I do believe it was just over jealousy and envy, and basically I was set up to be fired. And then when I came back into town, because she staged all this over the phone, when I came back into town, I didn't go back in there for about 3 weeks. And I go back for about 3 weeks because then I already saw the changes that were happening within the company. Um, and the changes weren't the greatest, and what was all going on regarding all that, on top of the fact that I still had 100% control over my income and how I was making my money. So I basically kind of walked away. They staged all this, and then I kind of just walked away from the whole situation, and they wanted me to sign a paper stating I wasn't going to collect unemployment. So that's another red flag that it was all staged, because she set all of that up. Um, and then, which I did, I signed the paper because I was already gainfully employed by myself. So I just maintained working in Detroit for all of that time, and there was some time periods where I flew back and forth to Florida and worked, and then there were some time periods where I would drive down to Ohio and work. And um, I stayed in that industry 100% of that time going forward. So when I left Applebee's in 2012, I maintained working in that industry all along. And then shortly after that, I eventually opened my own waitressing and bartending company, where I sent out servers and bartenders for different parties, different events, and had several contractors that I would also send out. I would take some of the parties, some of the events, and then send other people as well. So I had that going on at the same time this was all going on. And I maintained doing all of it as a whole. But I had a very different lifestyle back then. I was very healthy, I was very high functioning. My two older kids were being driven to and from school. I worked out every day. I had a whole system going. And then I would look at different real estate investments options. After I'd take my two kids to school, I would do that first thing in the morning. Then I'd go to the gym. There was a whole system going, all the way until my mother put on a whole 2013 escapade. So you can view that video separately. I've already released that. She was very jealous and envious of what I had going on in my life, what I was building, what I was doing, not really even understanding any of it, because there's no direct contact, there's no conversations between us. She doesn't know anything. But what she did is she was so jealous of what I had going on at that time period that she managed to kidnap my two older kids. So they were much younger back then. I think my son was 13 and my daughter was 10 when all this happened, or 12 and 9, something like that. Either way, that's what she pulled off. And it was that escapade that completely wiped out my waitressing and bartending business, along with the amount of money I had stacked and saved, and I was ready to make the next purchase on the next house. It had significantly reduced the amount of money that I had because of the shenanigans and the escapades and the running around and chasing my tail in circles, and with my kids being kidnapped. And then she's throwing in these court dates. She's using my kids. She used my kids' dad separately to get them to go to court to go against me to take these kids from me, when neither one of them is an involved parent in their life and never was. And then the one did not work for over 10 years. So here they were all going against me, creating all these problems. I'm the one building success. I've been the one taking them to school, providing, doing all this stuff all along the way. And she used them to create all these problems within my life. And that escapade went on for about 5 or 6 months, to where I couldn't get it to stop. So it significantly reduced the amount of money I had to go toward that next property, which is why it all got set back for so many years, and didn't end up purchasing that property that I was supposed to get in 2013. Didn't end up purchasing a property until I got this house in 2017. So that's how big of a setback I took from that situation. Um, but none of it should have ever been disrupted. No kidnapping should have been allowed to occur. The police allow this to occur. The front of the court system is broken. There's many problems with this. And then these people are over here just writing up whole false narratives about me. And when it gets in front of the judge is has a biased opinion, or is just judgmental overall, and doesn't understand someone running their own businesses or different streams of income, or that I've done numerous things along the way and built to a certain degree. And then they judge me based on what's in that paperwork, which is false information, and don't want to believe my reality or take the time to actually listen to what I actually have going on. And I'm way ahead of these people in life. And that's why we're here. That's what the problem is. It's over jealousy and envy, and each person wanting to have something to gain. Clearly, my mother was doing this to gain access to this trust fund or gain access to more of the funds. And then each of the kids' dads didn't want to pay child support, or they wanted to get money from me. One wanted to get money from me, and he had already owed over 30 grand in back child support, and then the other didn't want to pay child support. So each person had something to gain by going against me, and all this did was wipe out my business plans and everything I was building. So rebuilding from that 2013 escapade, I only remained in the entertainment industry, and I did not ever piece back together my waitressing and bartending company. I held on to it for a little bit and then just completely let it go because I didn't have the ability to just piece everything back together so quickly to keep everything running smoothly. I started back at square one with just being an entertainer and carrying out my income just that way and keeping it steadily running, working the same handful of nights per week, just to keep the steady flow of money going to rebuild what had all been lost. So I steadily maintained all of that all along the way. And then the problem I had was getting brain damage and getting injured giving birth while suffering from carbon monoxide poisoning in 2016. I had stayed dancing all the way until I was 30 weeks pregnant with my youngest child. So everything was fine. I was still working out all the time. I was still working the same regular nights. And then once I took a step down from everything I was doing to take a break from all of this, just to have this last baby, all of a sudden, the restaurant I go work at temporarily has this carbon monoxide issue, and it ended up destroying my life permanently. Walking in there at 30 weeks pregnant, giving birth while suffering from it, never returned from that day. And then I eventually went back to that establishment when the baby was 7 months old, worked 14 months of weekends before I became completely overloaded with carbon monoxide past the point of no return. So all of that happened due to the fallout of all these crimes, these escapades, these problems that had gone on, because I should have never been in that building in the first place. I shouldn't have been with my ex in the first place. The only reason we were together is because we were forced to work together due to the 2013 escapade and my mother using him to help try to kidnap my daughter and get all these problems going. And the only way to stop it and stop the harassment was to work with him, at least for a temporary period of time. It was not supposed to go on forever. So the type of person he is and what he has going on in his life is nothing comparable to where I'm at in life and what I have going on in the way that I live my life and what I'm out here doing. He's not doing any of that. He has a completely different lifestyle altogether. And at no time was he ever planning on working with me and helping me pick up the pieces of what I had already lost, what I'd already built and rebuilt. He was just in his own little world wanting to take for himself and use what I've worked for and the degree that I had gotten myself to in life to get himself up in life. Because he always had excessive amounts of child support coming out of his check his entire life because he's had kids his entire life. So those kids are all adults now. And back then, there was a lot of excessive money coming out of his check. So he would have never been able to get himself the job that he currently has with AT&T, the pay cut he had to take to get the job and slowly build to where he got to today. He wouldn't have been able to do that unless he was with me using my resources and what I had worked for. And by him doing that and me having the last baby, that caused all these problems. With me having to go work at this place, which I should have never been in, it's now a bigger problem because he's one of the people who have created a lot of the issues that are currently going on and the issues that have gone on along the way in the past 10 years. So it's very clear why the two of us would never even be together. If you took a step into our lives, that's all very clear. However, it was my lines of work, my employment, my different businesses, me working in the entertainment industry. It was me doing all that managed to hold everything together. It was the glue holding everything together along the way of all these escapades and all these problems. And it was my money that was continuing to build and provide. And that's how I managed to hold on to everything every step of the way because I can control when I work. Even now that I've been permanently injured and sick, I can control me going to work or not. I don't have to answer to anybody. If I'm just not well, then I just don't go. And there was a very long period of time where I was never okay, and I forced myself to go to get enough money to keep everything running for a couple of years. I did that. Just enough to keep everything flowing and rolling so I wouldn't take any further steps back, so I wouldn't lose anything further. I managed to hold on and do that during that time period. But that industry is extremely lucrative. So, um, with where things are today, if my injury had if that's not what I was doing as one of my streams of income when my injury occurred, we would have never survived the injury. I would have never been able to come up with the funds to pay out of pocket for treatment, to keep us alive, to go through almost 200 grand in treatment out of pocket, to get us to where we are today, because it truly took about 5 years of, there's 2.5 years of everyday treatment, and it was another like 15 months of 2 days a week, and another, I don't know, probably like a year of 6 months, about a day a week, and another year and a half of sporadic treatments once I lost the ability to maintain what I was doing, keeping the treatments going, because it was such a fragile situation rebuilding when I was so close to death, trying to figure all that out, that not one wrong move could be made. There couldn't be any disruptions to my income when I was barely holding on and barely getting through each week alive and barely able to work those 1 or 2 nights a week. And then eventually I was able to get it to 3 once I had a lot of treatment. Once I had well over 100 grand in treatment, I was able to get it to where I could do like 3 nights a week. But my functioning was very limited. So it was all of that was the glue keeping us alive, holding everything together, maintaining the bills. No other form of employment would have been able to produce that type of money with how sick and injured I was, with me never being able to work for someone else ever again due to the extreme nature of the injuries and how much time I spend chronically sick. Or it was even worse back then. But if that was not one of my streams of income, I would have never been able to pay for all that treatment. We would have never stayed alive. And it stayed that way to where I barely held on. I barely kept things going each week. The money was there. I just had to make sure I got myself there. And it's an illusion. People don't know that I don't feel good because of the way I look. It's an industry based on looks. People aren't thinking that. So if I'm really sick and unwell and I'm having all these internal symptoms, other people don't recognize that. So it was all an illusion. I just barely pulled it off. The 2 to 3 nights per weekend that I did for that time period that I did all that. And I stayed maintaining everything. I managed all the way through, all the way, until all the damage to my house occurred. And there was no way for me to pick up all the pieces as a whole without stopping that stream of income, which then in turn would stop how much treatment we were going to be having going forward. And it had already tapered off due to a bunch of other people's ignorant actions and harassment and the problems they all caused and the fallout from that, believing that we're not really that sick and injured, believing my income is a joke, or how I make my money is a joke, or I'm just so dumb and that's why I'm this stripper, because people like to use the word stripper. Really, you're an entertainer. That's what it says on your taxes. And then people misconstrue what that all consists of. So because all that had happened, it significantly reduced how much we were treating and then what was going to happen going forward. But it was what paid for everything, what continued to pay for everything, and how everything was maintained every step of the way. Um, because this house, with all the damage in it, should have already been an Airbnb 3 years ago. It was already set up for all that. That was all the crimes, my mother's delusional phone call placing, and these agencies that have helped her, that caused all those problems and the disruption for me to have to temporarily leave and go buy another house and live in it to get to safety, because of how sick we were from the amount of liquid gasoline that had spilled in this area initially. Now, it was my entertainment income that still held it all together and paid for all of this and paid for the fallout of all of this. Um, but coming back from, so I was gone about a year and a half. Coming back from that is when I began addressing all the damage to the home. It was literally over 100 grand in water damage done in 1 year flat. In that time frame I was gone, I had just remodeled the entire house. Right before that, it was already completed. It was already ready to be turned into the Airbnb. I intended on coming back, painting a few walls, fixing a couple things, and it should have been ready to go. And because of the amount of excessive damage that they caused, because of all the crimes of the large agencies around me, I'm having the problems that I'm still having today, why it's taking so long to put everything back together. But once all that happened and then I'm still chronically sick, permanently injured, I wasn't able to continue on with my entertainment income to keep everything flowing. But all along the way, there should have been several homes bought between 2013 and the current day. It's really all of my mother's crimes and escapades and the large agencies and people she uses to help her that has disrupted every move along the way. Even though there's no contact, no relationship, she does all of this behind the scenes. These people all do this behind the scenes. None of them know anything about my real life. They believe whatever she tells them about me. They think that because I'm a stripper, that like I'm just so dumb. Well, the reality is, if that was not one of my businesses, one of my streams of income, we would have never survived the initial injury, because of how limited I was with functioning. There's no way for me to work anywhere else for a lot less money. That it's not possible, because nothing would be able to be maintained. We would have never been able to get to treatment. We would have been deceased years ago. So that wasn't possible to do, because we did have to get a significant amount of treatment in order to be able to pick up any pieces of our lives. There was no way around it, and I didn't know how long that was going to be, and it truly took over 3 years. So if that was not my mainstream of income, or something I was already doing prior to the injury, we still wouldn't have survived the injury. But where I am today with it, I did have to stop my income altogether in order to get the real estate investments back on track and get everything running, because of the amount of damage and how much limited functioning I have. There was no way around it. So that's where my time and energy has been being focused, on top of the mounds of paperwork that I've been constantly dealing with for years on end. It never ends, because I run everything as a whole with the numerous different things I have going on. I run everything as a whole. There's always ongoing paperwork. And now with me being under Chapter 13 bankruptcy, I'm dealing with a homeowner's insurance claim, and then all these FOIA requested documents and all the crimes that have been going on with my mother, these other people, the large agencies. That's its own set of paperwork as well. So there's a lot of paperwork involved in everything that I do. Plus, I've been filming the videos. So it is a lot on somebody's plate, on top of my son being homeschooled. But yes, during that time period, it was a very lucrative business. It's always been a very lucrative business, and it depends on the city and state that you work in. With me, yes, I mainly worked out of Detroit in the beginning. In the last 5 or 6 years or so that I was in that industry, I only worked in Ohio. So um, it's a lot different working in Ohio than it is in Michigan. Also, they're open a lot later. They're open till 4 or 5 in the morning down there, versus Michigan, they're open till 2 a.m. But I made it work with how sick and injured I was. I made it work for that time period to keep everything together and try to finish carrying out my original plans back from 2013, when everything was initially significantly disrupted. Piecing it all back together with each disaster happening along the way, that's how I managed to hold on to everything. So with that industry, a lot of people think um, that you're selling sex, or there's prostitution, or there's other things involved, and that's just not always the case. Like I said, it depends on the city and state that you work in. On top of the fact that there's a lot of establishments that don't allow any of that to go on, and even if they do, or they know about it, usually they'll make people go outside of the building if something like that is going on. Although there are some places that will allow it in their buildings, but that's not every person who's in that industry. That's not every person's situation. That's not what each person that works there is doing. So with me, I don't need to do any of that. I literally go to work. When I would go to work, I would go to work and I would literally dance. There are some nights I spent the entire time I'd be there literally just dancing back to back to back to back to back to back all night long. It would go on for hours. So there's times where that has happened to me for entire nights. But with me, I literally spent the entire time I was in that industry, spent it literally dancing. Literally. That's all I'm doing. And I know there's a lot of jealous, envious people around me in my waking life as well, who seem to perceive this as I'm doing something different other than what I am. And I'm not, and I never was. Each portion of my life is compartmentalized. Everything is kept completely separate. Every aspect of my life, like that type of industry that I've worked in, then my waitressing and bartending, that stream of income, like my personal life versus my my kids and versus what I'm doing with my real estate investments, it's all compartmentalized. None of it has ever been mixed together. And it's always had to be that way. It's always been that way. So people have shit misconstrued when they think somebody is in that industry because they think they're dumb. Like, oh, she must be really dumb. Oh, she's so uneducated. That's why she works there. No one's comprehending that I made that business move and it was the right move for me because of what I had going on in my life at the time that all began. And the fact that my oldest had autism and there was problems getting him to and from school, which is why my older two were always driven and picked up from school. That was part of the reason I had to make that decision as well at that time period. And no time was I ever forced into this, and no time was I ever involved in any type of human trafficking or prostitution or any of that. I've literally been dancing the entire time. And it's a business. So I incorporate that into my life to make sure I would get to the nights that I needed to be there, the highest money nights, and I would get there those nights and then make the rest of my life flow because I've always had all these other situations running at the same time that this is going on, and I have to be able to manage everything as a whole overall. So I did that all along, and for some reason, all these people seem to think, different people, different reasons, seem to think that that's not what I'm there doing or that's not what I was doing all along. I don't even exchange my phone number with people. It would be very rare for me to ever exchange my number with somebody there ever. There's only been maybe like a handful or two of people ever in the 17 years I did this. So, yeah, like I would normally work the same schedule, same shifts. People knew where to find me. I would never even carry my phone out on the floor while working. It's a very professional, very high end industry. Um, it's not like what people who aren't familiar with the industry, it's not what they think it is. It's not like, oh, that girl's so dumb, that's why she does that, because she's just so dumb. And it's not some low paying position either, because if it were, people wouldn't do it. So it's a pretty lucrative business, and others misconstrue it because they have no knowledge of the industry, and they're not comprehending that it's an actual, like, I'm self-employed, it's my own business. Um, and that I pay them to work there. And it's a level above working for somebody else on top of the amounts of money that are generated in this industry. These are all, a lot of the people that visit these establishments are all very well paid. They're all business owners. They're in many lines of work, but a lot of them visiting there, it is considered a gentleman's club. These people have quite a bit of money to work with, to play with. It's not some joke. A lot of people come there and spend a lot of money. That's widely known. So it's not some small amount of money. It's not, I'm there because I'm so dumb and I'm so broke and I made this wrong move in life and that's why I'm there. No one was comprehending all along that I was taking that money and investing it in real estate every step of the way. But the problem I kept having is I have a deranged lunatic for a mother and all these organized, criminal officials in the background helping her wipe me out financially and caused all these restarts and these resets in my life. And so I'd have to rebuild from each one of those and then have that injury occur, which at the root is her criminal actions, and all this harassment is what landed me there at the root. Still had to come up out of that, pay for all of that. There would have been no other way to do any of that. So the industry itself is not a joke. It is a very lucrative business. I take it very seriously. I keep everything separate. If people meet me there and they want to continue to see me, they'll come back and see me there. I never brought the people into my personal life or vice versa, never brought the people from my personal life into my work. It's all been kept separate. Every single thing was kept separate and compartmentalized. So there's a lot of people misconstruing what they had perceived me to be doing all of that time or whatever's going on in that industry. I was literally dancing. That's it. That's it. It's nothing more than that. And no time was I ever there because I'm uneducated or I'm stupid. I'm there because I'm building success and I'm able to generate large sums of money in short periods of time and then pump that back into the real estate, which had been done and redone and with numerous different houses along the way. And literally the only problem is the criminal harassment by my mother and the people that are helping her. That's the only problem with any of it that I've had, because none of the stuff should have ever been disrupted. All of my business plans as a whole, they're all connected to each other, and it should have went straight into the next investment and straight into the next house. I should already be like 4 houses deep in the current. And my house in Ohio that I have shouldn't exist. I should have this one and like 3 others at this point from the time of my mother's 2013 escapade. So all of these people who thought that this industry is a joke, or that's all that I'm doing, or I'm just so dumb, that's not at all what's been going on. Especially from the time I became injured, I was barely holding on to life for several years. And if that's not what I was doing to make my money, again, we would not have lived. I would have never been able to come up with that money, that amount of money that I needed for all that treatment and pay my bills. It would have never been possible to do, because I can't punch somebody's clock. I stayed in an extreme state of physical sickness with like 50, 60 severe symptoms at once for a very long period of time. It's just that a lot of those were internal, or people couldn't really see, because especially in that industry, there's people aren't really thinking that somebody doesn't feel good. They're there in this like hype environment, this fast-paced environment, and it's based on looks. They're not really thinking anything like that. So if I had not done that, no, we wouldn't have survived. And I was supposed to be retired from this industry 5 to 10 years ago. And the only reason I'm not is because of all the disruptions and all the criminal harassment and everything that's gone on. That's the only reason that I even stayed in the industry as long as I did, because I did not have any intent of staying in it that long from day one. I mean, I didn't start doing this until I was almost 24. And I knew right away I would probably do it about 10 years from the time I began doing it. And it got, that time period got extended due to all the criminal harassment, all the problems, all the fallout, and everything that was going on. But at no time did I never not have a plan. My business plans are always in place 5+ years in advance. And all I kept experiencing was disruption after harassment after disruption after catastrophic event. And that caused me to be forced to continue on with that stream of income with that business, had it running longer than I anticipated because of all the problems I was having in order to keep it all going. So, yeah, there's just a lot of people who have me pegged on a whole different level, or because that's one of my businesses, one of my streams of income, they're perceiving it something different other than what it is. Not the fact that I've done all these other streams of income along the way to build to where I was, and that type of industry is above somebody who works for somebody else by a long shot. The amount of money made in the industry is way higher than what other people are thinking. They don't really know. If you don't really know anything about that industry, it's very lucrative. So the money that you're making there is pretty excessive. And then people just aren't looking at any of this properly. They're just thinking like, or maybe they're looking at my age or what I am now or whatever, or what I was a couple years ago, looking at my age, or, I mean, I don't really look my age. I don't know what people are thinking, but they're not thinking that I've done all these other streams of income along the way, and that I've always had numerous streams of income and numerous businesses running. It's just the crimes and the harassment are what's causing all the problems and causing things to be dragged out in each direction. Each thing that I have running has been delayed and dragged out by years due to the criminal harassment. So once the damage to my house happened almost 2 years ago, I had no choice. Once I had the house back in my possession, I had no choice but to stop everything and then continue to get that back in order, because that was already in order to be turned into a business 3 years ago. The paperwork was filed 3 years ago. So all of that should have just continued to flow, and it didn't because of the criminal harassment. And there's so many different people and agencies involved. It's happened so many times along the way, because these people at the root are after my missing stolen trust fund, trying to gain access to what's left of it, wanting to prove, these people all want to prove that I'm this mental disorder drug addict. That's why I'm in this industry that I'm in, that like supposedly just sells sex, and that I'm just a prostitute, and that's what they all think. Well, none of that's real. None of that's ever been what's going on. These people have literally been after this money, and by me having that as one of my streams of income, one of my businesses, they're using that to make it look like a negative factor, as if I'm really doing these things I shouldn't be doing, or something I'm doing is illegal, or it's just some low paying position, or it's because I'm dumb, or whatever they're thinking. It's the exact opposite. The people who hang out at these establishments and spend money at these establishments, they spend thousands of dollars in a night. A lot of people do. So it's a very high end establishment. I deal with a lot of high end professionals. I've been all these years. And that's what these people don't understand. They're just misconstruing the entire industry as a whole and then not knowing anything about me at the same time. And you mix it all together, the way they've tried to paint me to look is the exact opposite of who I am as a person. Or they want to believe that because these establishments serve alcohol, that I'm just this alcoholic or this mental disorder drug addict or something. And none of that's real, because there are some establishments where there is drug problems. Certain cities and certain areas, that is a problem in certain areas. It's not like that everywhere. So a lot of these establishments don't allow that to happen, or they fire you. They tell you not, I mean, not that you work for them, but they'll tell you not to come back. So at no time was that ever my position, especially during the time I was really, really sick. I wouldn't be getting there until midnight-ish sometimes. And they're only serving alcohol for 2 hours. I couldn't even drink for the first couple of years. It was like 3 years I couldn't even drink at all, hardly. So at no time was I even going in there and drinking or getting drunk. I was literally going in, barely getting my money and barely getting myself back home, barely alive. So, people trying to paint me as an alcoholic or a drug addict because I'm in this industry. Well, yeah, I mean, that can be some people's case depending on where they work at in the city and the state. That's not what I've ever been doing. And no time during any of this was that anything I was doing. I literally go in, make my money, remove myself. So there's a lot of people who know me over the course of time in this industry. I have been a low key celebrity all along. This is also one of the reasons I don't exchange phone numbers with people. I don't have time to incorporate that into my life. If I exchange phone numbers with every person in that industry who was wanting my phone number, I wouldn't have enough time to do anything. I would be literally sitting there chasing my tail in circles with constant messages. That's not something that can be incorporated into my life. My personal life is kept completely separate than my business life, and I kept it that way the entire time I stayed in that industry. The two never collided, they never crossed paths. So the way these idiots had pegged me, or they were trying to peg me on paper as being this alcoholic, and oh, she's just this dumb stripper and she's got a drinking problem and a drug problem and blah blah blah. Those are stereotypes. That's not what everybody's doing. If you're business minded and you're not, if you don't have a substance abuse problem and a mental disorder, you're going to very easily stack up quite a bit of money and be able to build on several other businesses, as long as you have the right mindset going into this and you live by a certain set of rules, which I have always had in place. Then you can be in and out and be ahead of everybody else in the world. And these people all tried to act like this was some joke, that my business is some joke, or how I was making my money was some joke. None of it was a joke. And I had been through so much and so many wipeouts that it just needed to continue on to get me through the next steps so I could get everything back in place from all the other fallout that was still going on. And even then, these people caused problems and disrupted, I'd say, the last year, under 2 years, like 1 to 2 years of what I had going on finishing up out of this industry. They also disrupted the last 1 to 2 years of me keeping everything steadily flowing with everything I had running as a whole. It all connects together because that was our lifeline to pay for treatment, to keep us alive, to keep us so we're not suffering as many symptoms. And then to keep my real estate investments rolling, it had to continue a certain amount of time. And these people also disrupted that as well. Anything they could do to try to disrupt everything I have going on, to try to paint me to look like what they want me to look like so they can continue to gain access to this trust fund, is what was all at the root of that. But once the damage to my home happened, I had no choice but to stop, but to retire, but to completely address all of the damage in order to pick anything up and get anything to continuously flow. That was my only option out of the situation I was left with, which I'm still tying up currently. So that should all be situated, I'd say, in about 4 to 6 weeks, maybe. I don't even think less than 2 months. I would definitely say less than 2 months. It should all be situated in about 4 to 6 weeks. That should all be done, and then I can make my next moves. But it's going slower because of all the disruptions with me working in the entertainment industry and what these people who have been harassing me and causing problems in my life, what they created during that, on top of everything else I had just come out of and all those extreme circumstances I was already living with and dealing with. They created so much more problems with that at the direction of my deranged mother, who's never built anything for herself. She's taken from others to get herself to where she is. She's never made more than $30,000 a year as a Beaumont Hospital employee, and was extremely jealous of everything I had been building every step of the way, and wanted others to perceive me as some piece of shit so they can all take a piece of the pie to this stolen trust fund, that they initially didn't realize that I was aware of it. But I am aware of it, and it is going to be found one way or another. I'm owed all of this money back that they have fraudulently gained access to, plus what's left. And that's what they are still attempting to gain access to, is what is left, which is why all the criminal harassment still, it continues on because of all that. So yes, it is one of my, it was my mainstream of income for quite some time, and it was very lucrative, and there was no reason for any of these disruptions to occur other than the criminal harassment. um, Everything would have been tied together and tied up, all these loose ends would have been tied up years ago. None of this should have ever spiraled to the degree that it has. And yes, these people are still attempting to paint me a certain way on paper, and then paint my streams of income to look like I'm just so dumb, or my different businesses, or how I made my money along the way, when no one actually knows the entire story as a whole, because I've done many things along the way. I started building at age 14, gainfully employed at 16. So I've been building for a very long time. This isn't something I just woke up and magically did. It took me years and all these wipeouts along the way, to even get things where I have it today and to begin going forward. There's a lot that has gone on. And again, if I was not in the entertainment industry, no, we wouldn't have ever survived our injuries in the first place. So this industry is not a joke. It's not all about prostitution. It's literal entertainment, people dancing. It's not about people having a drug problem or a drinking problem. It's literally people dancing. That's it. So the ignorance of the people who all thought something else about me, none of that was ever real. I've never been a prostitute. I've never done anything wrong for my money. And I'm not ashamed of anything that I have done. So anybody thinking all this bullshit about me, or you're continuing to pass delusions around town about me, I don't really care. You look stupid as fuck, because none of that's ever been real pertaining to my situation. So I will be back with more. I just had to clear some of that up. Thanks. Bye.